Welcome back. In today's video, I want to show you guys how we can actually integrate Firebase into our Nuxt-3 application. For those of us who don't know, Firebase, according to their website, is an app development platform that helps you to build and grow apps and games your users will love. It's backed by Google and trusted by millions of businesses around the world. Essentially, this is saying that you can use Firebase as a backend solution for your application, right? It provides a web SDK that's pretty cool. It's pretty easy to work with. We're going to be using UI thing as well for styling and the VeeValidate module for Nuxt. So if you visit vuefire.vue.js.org and go down to the Nuxt section, click on getting started, then we'll see all the installation instructions. Now, to help us, plan our application, I'm going to be using eraser.io just so we can have an outline of what we'll be doing and, the different steps that we'll be taking. So if you visit the eraser.io application, create an account, then we can create different files. So essentially, I created this roadmap file. So it will actually outline what we'll be doing in this video. So I want to create something like a SaaS product that will allow users to create an account and basically manage their pets. Cool. So let me just type that in real quick. Cool. So this is what we'll be building. The stuff that we'll actually need should include, let me just make this bold. We're gonna need Nuxt. We're gonna need UI thing for styling. We're gonna need Firebase, and I think that's it. We may throw in view email as well. I'm not sure. It depends on the flow of the video. But let's see what we can accomplish with these things. Cool. So these are the different packages or technologies that we'll be using, and if we should list out the steps, let me just use a checkbox to outline the steps. First, we'll have to create a Nuxt app, right? Then we'll add UI thing. Afterwards, we'll create a Firebase project, and then we can look at configuring the Firebase project. Right after it's configured, we'll add a config to our Nuxt app. So let's add config to Nuxt app, and then afterwards we can create a registration page. After that, we can create a login page. And then we might create a forgot password page. Oh, that's forgot password page. And let's put an asterisk beside this because we may or may not add this. Afterwards, we'll create a dashboard. Then we'll add a middleware so that we can prevent unauthorized users from visiting our dashboard. And then we'll add the functionality for managing, let me say managing pets. So this will involve creating, updating, and deleting the different pet records. And we are going to add logout functionality. Cool. Now at some point we may create a login email so that after the user is logged in, we'll send a notification to that email to let them know that, hey, someone just logged into your account. We may do this, we may not, depending on the flow of the video. I think these steps will pretty much cover what we'll do in this video. Let's see. So before we jump into creating a Nuxt application, I want to quickly show you guys how our application will flow from a bird's eye view. So from start to finish, you know, the different steps that we'll actually take. And I'm going to do this with the help of a diagram. I'm going to open the canvas and click on this little plus icon right here. I'm going to select diagram as code, and then I'm going to do a sequence diagram. Cool. So we're going to come over to the code section. I'm going to clear all of this, and I'm going to give my diagram a title. So it's the end-to-end flow of our app. Cool. So the first thing in our application will be a client. So this is anyone that visits the application. The client here basically represents our web application. I'm going to give it an icon of a desktop. And the first thing that's going to happen is our client is going to send a request to Firebase, right? Let's give Firebase a Firebase icon as well. And our client is going to send a register request. Cool. Now, once this request is sent, Firebase will do some checks internally to see if this user can actually be registered. So next, we're going to use this Auth keyword right here. I'm going to give it a label, and it's going to say user exists. So this is essentially Firebase checking if the user exists. So if the user already exists, then Firebase is going to send an error message back to the client to say that, hey, this person already exists. They can't be registered again. We're going to say Firebase back to the client, user exists, with an error message. Cool. Now, if that's not the case, then we want to use this else block. And this is going to say user can be created. So if the user can be created, then Firebase is going to send back to the client that the user was created. And at this point, the user is going to be logged in, right? And once the user is logged in, then our client needs to redirect our user to the dashboard. So we're going to represent that by saying that the client is going to send the user to the dashboard, and we're going to give our dashboard an icon as well, grid. And it's going to say redirect to dashboard. Cool. So following the diagram so far, our client visits or user visits the application. They send a request to register or create an account to Firebase from the app. Firebase will check if the user exists, and if the user does not exist, if the user does exist, sorry, then an error will be sent back to the client, right? And if the user can be created, then the user will be created and sent back to the client, and then the client will redirect the user to our dashboard. Cool. Now for the login process, our client will actually send a request to Firebase again, and this will be a request to log in. Cool. Now, once this request is sent to login, then Firebase will again check to see does the user exist. Now, if the user exists and the credentials are correct, then Firebase will respond to the client by saying user is logged in, and then our client will redirect our user to the dashboard. So redirect user to dashboard. Cool. Now, if the user doesn't exist or the credentials sent to login are incorrect, then Firebase should respond with an error message. So let's say something is wrong. Then Firebase is going to respond to the client to say error, something is wrong. Cool. And of course, the error message will be more specific than this coming from Firebase. So far, the login flow will be user visits our app, sends a login request to Firebase. Firebase will check if the user exists. If they do exist and the credentials are correct to log in, then it will log the user in, send that response to the client. The client will now send the user to the dashboard. Cool. And if the credentials are incorrect, or let's say the user does not exist, then it will send an error message back to the client and will display that to the user. Now, once the user is on the dashboard, then they will be able to perform the different operations on their specific pet records, right? So the dashboard, once the user is on the dashboard, it will actually send a request to Firebase. And the request will be get the pet records for this user that's logged in. Cool. Now, once this request is sent, Firebase will internally load the records for the user. And once all of those records are found, then it will actually send that response back to the dashboard. Send records. Cool. So down here, the user is on the dashboard. Once you land on the dashboard, you want to load all the records for that specific user. And once this request is sent to Firebase, then Firebase will internally check for the records, load them up, and send them back to the dashboard. Cool. Next, we want to move on to our user performing the different CRUD operations. So dashboard will send a request to Firebase for each operation. So perform CRUD operations, and then now Firebase will internally handle CRUD operations, right? And then Firebase will then send a response to our dashboard with the response of operations. Cool. So let me scroll down a little bit. So following from this point on, we're going to perform the CRUD operation. So whether it be creating a new pet record, updating or deleting a pet record, we're going to send the request to Firebase. Firebase will handle it and send the response back to our dashboard. And just to distinguish between the different flows, let me go ahead and use the activate keyword here and the deactivate down here, so you know where each start and where each stop. So we activate the dashboard. So this flow is from here to here. Let's do another one for up here. Just so the diagram is a bit clearer. Cool. Next, we want to look at logging the user out. And this is done from the dashboard as well, because of course you have to be logged in to log out. It doesn't make sense for a random person that's not logged in to be logged out. So from the dashboard, we're going to send that logout request to Firebase. All right. Let's activate the dashboard here again. Firebase is going to internally log the user out and then send that response back to the dashboard. Now, once the dashboard receives this response, right, it should redirect the user to the sign in page. In this case, it's going to be our client. Send the user to login page. Cool. So this is pretty much the flow for application. So let me just go it over again. The client in this case represents our web app, right? This is our Nuxt application. And the user will visit our application, send a registration request if they don't have an account. Firebase will check if the user exists. If they don't exist, then we send an error. If they do exist, then we send an error to say, hey, this person already exists. Then they probably should be signing in instead of trying to create a new account. And if the user can be created, then they will be created, and that response will be sent to our web application. Our web application will then redirect the user to the dashboard. Cool. So that's the registration process. For the login process, the user will visit our app. They'll send the login request to Firebase. Firebase will check if the user exists. If the user does exist and the credentials are correct, then they'll be logged in and this response will be sent to our web application. Our web app will then redirect the user from the login page to the dashboard. If something is wrong, let's say the account does not exist or the credentials are incorrect, then this response will be sent back to the client and displayed to the user. Cool. Once the user is on the dashboard, when they land on the dashboard, right, a request will be sent to get the pet records for this specific user from Firebase. Firebase will actually load the records for the specific user and send that response back to the dashboard. And that's this flow right here. Now, when the user wants to create, update, or delete a record, they'll send that request to Firebase. Firebase will handle it and send the response back to the user on the dashboard. When the user is done and they actually want to log out, they'll send that logout request to Firebase. Firebase will log the user out, send that response back to the dashboard, and then the dashboard will redirect them to the login page. Cool. So hopefully this helps a little bit. I'm going to see if I can actually copy this diagram and add it to the README so you guys can have it for reference. I should be able to create a figure out of it. Yes, I can. If I create a figure, I'm going to rename it end to end flow, right? I'm gonna copy it. Let's see, select it, copy it as a PNG, and I should be able to paste it over here. Nice. So with that out of the way, let's just start now. Let's create our application and add UI thing to it. So here we have VS Code open, and I'm just going to go ahead and create a new Nux application by running the npx nuxt-init command. And this will create our files and then ask us what package manager we want to install the dependencies with. So I'm going to choose npm, and it's going to go ahead and install those dependencies. Now, once the dependencies are installed, then it will ask us if we want to initialize a Git repository. I'm going to go ahead and say yes. And now it's time to add UI thing to our application. So I'm going to run the command npx UI thing at latest init to initialize UI thing in our application. And this command will just ask us a bunch of questions, mainly around where we want different files to be stored and all of that. So you can see here it's asking us what theme we want to go with. For this one, I'm going to go with Violet. It's asking where we want our Tailwind CSS file to be located. The default is fine. My config should be created here as well. I want my components to be stored in the components /UI directory. Composables should be stored in the composables folder, utils in the utils folder. And I want to overwrite a component if it already exists. And I don't want to use my own file names for the components. I'm just going to use the defaults. Then I'm going to install the dependencies from UI thing with npm. So you can see where the different folders were created by the init command from UI thing, and it's just installing the dependencies now. So once the init command is done, you can see where, like I said earlier, the different files were created. It also added this prettier configuration, and I'm going to go ahead and clear the terminal now and look at the nuxt-config file. So it added these 4 modules: Tailwind CSS, Nuxt color mode, view used for Nuxt, and Nuxt icon. And it also configured the Tailwind module, color mode module, and added this shim, set it to false in our TypeScript object. And this is partially enabling takeover mode. So to complete this process of enabling takeover mode, we're going to go to our extensions, We're going to type in @built-in. Then we're going to search for TypeScript and disable it in this workspace. We're going to have to reload VS Code. And then now when we take a look down here, we should see where takeover mode is enabled. Cool. So we can go ahead and clear that. As for the extensions that I use when developing Nuxt-3 applications, I'm just going to go ahead and add them to the workspace recommendation. That way, if you should clone the repository, then it will actually show the recommendations to you and you can add what you like and, just remove what you don't like. Cool. All right, so going back to our roadmap, we created our Nuxt-3 application, we added UI thing. Now we're going to create our Firebase project. Cool. So we're going to go to firebase.google.com, this link right here, and we're going to click on get started. Now you should have an account once you have a Gmail email and you're signed in, right? You can click on get started, and there should be this add project button right here. So this big plus button, you're going to click on it, and you're going to give your project a name. I'm going to name my project pets. Cool. I'm going to hit continue. For this project, we don't need Google Analytics, but if you need Google Analytics in your application, then by all means, you can just enable it for the project. I'm just going to go ahead and disable it for now and click on create project. Now, this little thing will take a few seconds to create our project. As soon as it's done, I'll be back. All right, so our project is now ready. So let's hit continue. And it will actually take us to the screen. Now, within this application, we're going to actually use a few things from this build dropdown. The first is actually going to be authentication. So we click on it, and then we click on get started. For this project, we're going to actually allow our users to sign in with email and password. So we're going to go ahead and enable this, and then click on save. And we're going to also add another provider, which is Google, right? We're going to click on Google, enable it. We can give our project a name and configure our support email. And then we're going to click save. So once that's saved, we can go back to the build dropdown and we're going to store our data within the Firestore database. So we can click on the Firestore database and then we click on create database. And then we're going to have to select location. Now, the location that you select should be the one that's closest to your users. And it's giving us a warning down here to say that, hey, after you've set this location, it can't be changed later. So, be careful when you're setting this location. I'm going to click on next. I'm going to work with the default one. Then it's going to say that you should set your security rules. Now, the concept of security rules in Firebase or a Firebase project revolves around a set of rules that will govern who can access what in your application. And we'll take a look at them later. For now, we're just going to start in test mode. And test mode is just saying that we're going to allow anyone to read and write to your database until this time stamp or until this date. So this date is 2024, February 22nd. So February 22nd, 2024. So up until this time, anyone will be able to write and read to your database. This is not secure at all. Don't do this for production. And like I said, we'll take a look at the rules later on in the video. So I'm going to go ahead and click on create. It's going to take a few seconds to create a database, but it should be up soon. Cool. And this is our Firestore database. So that's good. I think that's one more of the checklist. So we created a Firebase project. We're going to now configure the Firebase project, which I think we did some of this earlier, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to add the VueFire module to our Nuxt application. Like I said, you can just go to Google, search for VueFire. It should be one of the top results. Click on the link. It will take you to this website. click on get started. Then we can go down to the Nuxt section. It may be collapsed like this. So just expand it and click on get started. And with your favorite package manager selected, we'll just copy the installation command. So I'm going to copy this, go back to VS Code, open my terminal and paste it in, delete this gibberish off the end and press enter. Okay, with that installed, let's go back to the documentation. And if it's saying that if we're going to use server-side rendering, then we also need to install Firebase admin and the pair dependencies for it. So I'm going to click npm again, and I'm going to copy this command, go back to VS Code, paste that in, and press enter again. All right, with that installed, we're going to go back to the documentation, and it's telling us how to configure the module. So it's saying that next, add the nuxt-vuefire to the module section of the Nuxt config and configure it with the credentials created in your app settings in your project overview, which is this area. So our project overview is here. If we click on project settings, then scroll down to the end, we'll see the option to add an app to our project. We can add an iOS app, an Android app, a web app, Unity, or a Flutter app. Since we're working with Nuxt, we're going to go ahead and add a web app. So I'm going to click on this. I'm going to name this Nuxt Pets Web App. I'm not going to be using Firebase hosting, so I'm just going to click on register app right here. And it's actually giving us our Firebase configuration. Now we'll actually need this later. So let me just copy it right now and click on continue to console. And if we scroll down, we can always retrieve the credentials for the specific application down here. Cool. So following the documentation, let me close this one. We should add this to our modules array. So we copy that, go to our Nuxt config, paste that in, hit save, and then we go back to the documentation for VueFire. We're going to copy this VueFire config, and then we're going to paste it in our Nuxt config as well. Let me just format this real quick. Down here, paste that in. Cool. Now I'm going to go ahead and copy my Firebase configuration and paste it here. So like I said earlier, we go to project settings, and then we scroll down to the end, add an app if you haven't already done so. I have one here, and I'm just going to copy this. So this is what I need. Of course, in a real application, you might want to put this in an environment .env file, which I probably think is the best thing to do. So I'm going to double click this area, create that .env file, paste the configuration in, and I'm just going to use the multi-cursor feature from VS Code. Select all of these, go back, and I'm going to go over, replace the semicolons with an equal sign, and remove these commas at the end of this thing. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to also copy just the keys, right? And I'm going to come back here to my config. I'm going to paste them in. I'm going to use the multi-cursor feature again. And I'm going to say these are coming from process.env. And I'm going to paste that in again and put a comma at the end. Cool. Now we're getting this red squiggly because the types for VueFire were not generated by Nuxt. So in order to generate that, we're going to run the nuxt prepare command, right? So this command right here, I'm just going to click on the run button from the npm script section. It's going to run the post install command, which will generate the types for Nuxt. And just like that, our red squiggly is gone, and we should be able to get some TypeScript help from Nuxt for this VueFire object. So now what I want to do is if I come here and press Control and space, I get the option to enable authentication. Cool. So I'm going to say this is enabled. And because I want authentication on the server side, I'm going to set the session cookie to true, right? And in the documentation for VueFire, it will also tell you that if you're going to use SSR with any Auth related feature, you will need to create a service account. Now, how do you create a service account? You go back to your Firebase project. In this project overview section, you click on this little gear, project settings, and then you come over to the service accounts tab. Cool. Now, once you're here, this Firebase admin SDK option is what you want. You can click on the others, but you don't need them right now, at least not for this project. So Firebase admin SDK, select the Node.js one, and then you can click on generate new private key. I was telling you that ensure that you don't share this private key because it basically gives someone full access to your Firebase project, and you should not push it to GitHub or any other public repository. Cool. So I'm going to click on generate key. It's going to ask me to save that. I'm going to save it and open it in a folder, right? It's open on my next screen. I'm going to drag it over into VS Code, map it here, and I'm going to rename this. Let's rename it to sa.json. Cool. Now in your .env file, you want to add a path to this service file under this variable name. So Google underscore application underscore credentials. Let's just copy this, put it in our .env file, and point it to the sa.json file. It is also important that you add this sa.json file to the gitignore, save it. That way it gets grayed out and it's not pushed to GitHub. Cool. Next, let's see. What else should we be doing? If we want to use app check, I'm not going to enable app check for this project, but app check essentially is a service that Firebase offers, and it allows Firebase to only accept requests from your specific application. So it involves creating a reCAPTCHA key and adding that reCAPTCHA key to your config, your .env file, so that whenever your application sends a request to any service on Firebase, let's say it sends a request for authentication or for some Firestore operation, then AppCheck will ensure that this request is coming from the domain that you specified. And if the request is coming from any other suspicious domain, then we'll actually block that request before it even gets to your security rules and all of that. So for production grade applications, you definitely should enable AppCheck and tell your Firebase project to only accept requests from a specific domain versus accepting a request from anywhere. Cool. Now, I think that's it for configuring our application. I don't think we need to enable anything else right here. So let's see what we have on our roadmap. So we configured Firebase. We added the Firebase configuration to our Nux application. Next, we're going to move on to creating a registration page. Cool. So let's go back to VS Code, and we are going to, let me first reload this. I'm going to right click this area. I'm going to click on Nux project structure, and the folders that I want to add the, let's see, the middleware folder, because we're going to create middlewares in just a bit. The pages folder, and do I need plugins? I don't think I need plugins. Let's just go with these two for now. So the first page is going to be our login page. Cool. And this is not the page that we're going to work on first. First page that we're going to work on is actually our register page. So we're going to say register / index of view. It's going to create a register page for us. And to get started, we're going to actually add some components from UI thing. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and add a script right here. It's going to be called UI. And it's going to say npx / yes, UI thing, latest. Cool. And that's the add command from UI thing. I'm seeing where 2 dependencies are outdated. The Firebase admin, I would not recommend updating to 12 because I think one of the VueFire dependencies depend on this specific version. Cool. So don't update this, or at least not for now. For our Vue version, we can actually update this. So let's go ahead and save that. And if you're wondering what is causing me to see these yellow squiggly lines, is actually this extension, and it's called npm outdated. So this one right here by Mark Skelton. Yeah, this is the one. Cool. So now that we have our UI script added, let's just go ahead and run it. And we'll add, I will add the dependencies as we go along, or the components as we go along rather. So here I'm going to go for the button. We're going to need that. Let's say we want a container. I'm going to say let's add a nav bar. We want input fields. I'm not sure if we're going to need a multi-select. We definitely need the divider. And I'm not sure what else we need. We need a toast, right? So let's go ahead and add Sono. And I think that's about it for now. Let me just go ahead and add these. It's going to ask us if we want to add the dependencies for the different components. I'm going to say yes. Now, as soon as these dependencies are installed, we get this instruction here to remember to add the view sono to our app.vue file. So I'm going to copy that, close that terminal, and go to the app.vue file. Cool. I'm going to remove the Nuxt welcome component that comes with our app.vue by default. And I'm going to add the Nuxt loading indicator at the top. I'm not using layouts. I'm not going to add a layout here. I'm going to say Nuxt page. And then I want to paste that view sono component in. Cool. Now for the register page, all right, let's see, how do I want this? Let me just go ahead and run the application to see if everything is working as it should. So npm run dev. So that's starting up. Let's go to the browser and open that in a new tab. So the application started with no issues. Let's check the terminal. I mean the console, the browser console. That's clean as well. Let's open our dev tools to get started, and we're gonna go to settings first, expand the sidebar, and I'm gonna check this feature as well. To close and click outside. Cool. And I'm gonna use the pages tab, and I'm going to redirect to our register page. Cool. Of course, we have no errors in the browser console, and our page is blank as expected. So let's go back to VS Code. Let's stop the server because we need to actually add Yup and VeeValidate Yup to help us with form validation. So I'm going to go ahead and say npm I yup at VeeValidate /yup. Now, once these 2 packages are installed, I can go ahead and run the application again. I'm gonna minimize the terminal. Let's see if yup, it's saying that it's using yup with VeeValidate. So let's minimize that and let's style our register page. Cool. So we're gonna say that this should have a minimum height of device viewport height. It's gonna be a flex container. Let's see, what else do we need? We also need the items to be centered, just white center. And instead of just a div, we're going to use the UI container component. Okay, I'm not getting the color that I need to get here. I guess I need to reload VS Code. Let me reload. There we go. It has the right color now. It's picking up the components. And then now I want to add a div right here. And this will actually house our elements. I'm going to say this should have a maximum width of not 0, but about 340 pixels. And the width should be 100%. Cool. Now inside here, I'm going to have the heading, something that says create account. Let's add some classes to this as well. It's going to be semi-bold. On large screens, I'm going to say text for Excel. On regular screens or mobile and up, I'm going to say 3XL. Cool. To this div right here, I'm going to say make everything inside of this div center. I'm going to add a subtext, something that says start managing your pets today. And to this p element, paragraph element, I'm going to add a class. I'm going to add text muted foreground, and this will just dim the text a bit and give it a margin top of 2. So let's save that, see what it looks like. So our web page is reloading, and there we go. We have the create account and start managing your pets today. This is a bit small. So let's make it a bit bigger by adding text LG to it. That's fine. Nice. So now we want to add our form, right? So our form, let's give it some margin from the top, empty 10. And let's add a field set so we can add our input elements and our button inside of it. Inside of this field set is going to be actually a grid with a gap of 5, right? And I'm going to use the UI v input element. I'm going to give it a name of name, a label, full name, and I don't think I need to add a placeholder, do I? Let's just add a placeholder of John Doe. So let's go back to the browser. This is what this looks like. Cool. We may need to add an asterisk to this so that user know that it's required. Yeah, that's more like it. So next we want to add the email and password field. So this is going to be email. The placeholder for this can be john@example.com. And we're going to make the type email. The name for this field is going to be password. The label is going to be password. We don't need a placeholder for this one, but we're going to set the type to password. So let's save that. And this is what it looks like. Cool. If we wanted to, we could add icons to these as well. But I don't think that's necessary. We just say icon, we'll say the user, and that icon would show up right here. But like I said, I don't think it's necessary for this. But this may help some users. I'm not sure. It depends on the use case for your specific application. You can add icons if you want. Cool. Now for the button, I'm going to say UI button. If I can spell. The type is going to be submit, and the text is going to be create account. I'm going to save that and see what we have here. Nice. Also, we want to add a button that will allow our user to sign in with Google. right? So we're gonna add another button here. The type is gonna be button. So it will be full. The variant will not be secondary, it will actually be outline. And we're gonna add the sign in with Google, sign up with Google text to it. We're gonna also add the Google icon next to it. So we're gonna say logos, Google icon. I'm gonna save that and see what we have here. Nice. So we have this create account form that we quickly scaffolded. And now we're going to actually create the validation for this form. So this is why we actually installed Yup and VeeValidate Yup. So in our utils folder, we're going to create a file or a new utility that's called validations, right? And we're going to import Yup and some of the objects from Yup. The first one being object. We're gonna import string as well. If we need anything else, we'll actually just go ahead and import it. But for now, we're gonna export a constant called register schema. And it's gonna be equal to an object with the shape. It's going to have a name. It's going to be a string. It should be required. We're going to give it a label of full name. And we're going to give it a minimum character length of 2 and a maximum of 50 is fine. Next, we also need an email, which should be a string. It's required. It has a label of email and it's of type email. We also want a password as well. It should be a string. It's required. The label should be password. Minimum should be 8. Firebase actually has a 6 character minimum requirement, but I'm just going to leave it at 8. If you want your password to be stronger, you can actually add a test to the end of this, and you can add the condition that you want to test for. Inside of the test function, you can add a regular expression to check if the password has special characters, if it has lowercase and uppercase letters, the whole works. I think it's easy to find such a regular expression by just Googling it. Then you can just plug it into your test function right here. Cool. So we're going to go ahead and save that for now. While we're here, let's just go ahead and add the login schema while we're at it. And for the login, we only need the email and password, which should be the same as these two up here. And for the forgot password schema, all right, this one will just require an email. Now, whenever you create a new utility that's auto imported by Nux, in order to use it in your components, you have to restart the application. So I'm just going to go ahead and restart. And I'm going to copy the register schema from here. Let me close this. And in our script setup, I'm going to go ahead and use the VeeValidate use form composable to handle our form validation. So I'm going to say const open close bracket equal to use form, right? And use form accepts an object, and one of the properties within that object is the validation schema, right? And the validation schema accepts the schema that you want to use to validate the given form. In our case, we're going to use a utility function provided by VeeValidate called toTypeSchema. And this utility function is actually coming from the VeeValidate /yup package that we installed. Where is it? This one. Cool. So now we just pass our register schema into this. And from here, we're going to extract the handle submit function and the is submitting variable. So this will be used to handle our form submission, and this will be used to check if our form is being submitted. Now, while our form is being submitted, let me just copy this. We want to disable our input fields. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and on our field set element, I'm going to use a disabled property and set it to is submitting. So this disable will be true once is submitting is true. So we can save that, right? And we want to call this submit function, right? And submit will be equal to handle submit, and handle submit accept an asynchronous function, and it passes the values from the form as a first argument and the context for the form as a second argument. Cool. So here you can see where values actually is typed to the return type of our validation schema. So the type of the schema is name, email, and password being a string. And if we hover over values here, we can see where we have that type. Cool. So now we can log values dot email, name, or password. Cool. So now we have to hook up this submit function to our form. So we're going to come to our form element, use @submit, and set it to submit. Cool. Now if we go back to our application, reload the page, then we have a whole lot of hydration warnings in the console. These warnings that you're seeing here, they're actually coming from the Radix View use ID function. There's an issue that's being worked on right now where they're trying to fix this error. What's happening is on the server side, the ID that's assigned to each input and label is different from the one being assigned client side. So it's not a break-in, it's not an error that will stop your application from working. It's just a warning to say, hey, there's some mismatch between what's rendered on the server versus what's rendered on the client. Cool. So now if we try to submit this form, we'll see all the error message popping up. Cool. And the label that we added to our validation is actually being used in the error message. So you can see where full name was a label added to the name property, and it's being used in the error message right here. Same for email, same for password. So this full name that you're seeing here is directly related to this label right here. Cool. Now, let's go to the VeeValidate documentation, and we're going to go up to authentication. So under the guide section, we're going to click on authentication, and it's going to show us how we can actually log in with or create an account with Firebase. So first, we need to get the Auth instance, right? So let's copy this and paste it in our script section here. Allow it to comment. Cool. So we have the Auth instance in our page. Next, we want to use the different functions from Firebase itself. So in order to get that, we have to go to the documentation for Firebase. So we're going to go back to our Firebase project, and up here we have this link to go to the docs. And if we go to the build dropdown and then go to authentication, we will get some more information on how the authentication side of Firebase works. Now, since we're working with the web, we can go to this web dropdown right here, and we will get the option to, look at different authentication methods. I think the option to create an account is actually under the get started method or the get started section. So let me see. Sign up new users. Yes. So what we want to do is we want to actually get this create user with email and password function from Firebase. So let me just go ahead and copy this. I'm going to import it up here. I don't need this bit because I already have the Auth instance down here, right? And inside of my submit function, let me use a try catch block. I'm going to type this error to any, and up here I'm going to say const open close bracket equal to await create a user with email and password. I'm going to pass in the authentication instance first. Then I'm going to pass in the email and password that was submitted by the user. Now we're getting this red squiggly because auth can be null. So what we have to do in TypeScript is just put this exclamation mark behind it. Let me just put this above these two. Cool. And from this, we're going to get our user, right? So what this will do is it will create a user with this email and password. Once our user is created, we actually want to assign the name that they entered here to the display name property of the user. So what we can actually do is we can get the update profile function from Firebase Auth. And once the user account is created, we're going to say await update profile, and we're going to pass in the user instance, the user that was just created, and we're going to set the display name to the values.name. So this values.name is this name that's entered up here. Cool. Now, once the user is logged in, we want to redirect them to the dashboard, like we discussed in the diagram earlier. So once the account is created, we should send them to the dashboard, and then they can, from there, manage their different pet records. Cool. So we're going to say return, wait, navigate to, and we're going to say admin, let's say dashboard. Cool. And we also want to replace this route, so the user can't press the back button to come back to the register page. Now, if I should do this now, we'll get an error because this page does not exist. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to create a new page. I'm going to paste it in and put index at the end. Cool. Now this page, let me just put some placeholder text right now. It should say welcome back, and I want to put the name of the user that's logged in right there. So I'm going to say I want the user from Firebase, and to get the user from Firebase using VeeValidate, we just say const user equal to use current user. Cool. Now I'm getting this quickly because I need to reload VS Code. So let me reload VS Code. And once that's done, if I hover over this use current user, then it says that it returns a reactive variable of the currently authenticated user in the Firebase app. Cool. So I'm just going to come up here and say user question mark display name and hit save. Of course, we want to add a little bit of style to this. I'm going to say font semi-bold and large screens. It's going to be text Excel, 3 Excel, and mobile and up. It's going to be text to Excel. Cool. So let's go ahead and try this out now. Before we do, let me just handle this error message. So we can show the error message. Let's just log something for now. Error.message. And of course, for better user experience, we want to show some form of loading indicator. For this, I'm going to use the ViewSana package. So I'm going to say const open close bracket equal to use Sana. Is that how it is? Let's see. I have title. What properties do I have in this thing? No, I need to pass a message first. So the title is going to be loading. And then the second argument should have, I think it's a description. Yes, something that says creating your account. Let's see, do I get back? Oh, okay. So I have to say loading, right? This is going to be the ID, Can I say loading? Yes. So it's gonna say loading. The description should be we're creating your account. Let me hit save. As soon as the user is created and the display name is updated, then we want to upload the state of this loading post. I'm gonna say loading, or it should be, let's see. So once we display this loading toast, then if we successfully created the user and updated their profile, I want to say username.success and say account created successfully, and we want to tell it to update the state of this toast instead of creating a new one. If we get an error message, we want to say display the error message and update the loading toast that's up here. Cool. So let's save this and test it out on our website. All right, so let's enter our name. Let's go with John Doe. Let's go with John at example.com and a simple password. All right, let's clear this and hit create account. And just like that, our account was created. And you can see where we were actually redirected to the dashboard. So it's safe to say that this is working as expected. So let's go back to our register page, right? And now we want to test out the signing up with Google. Cool. So according to the VeeValidate documentation, if you want to sign up with a provider, you first have to create this new provider in a separate script. So we're going to copy this script right here. We're going to come back to our registration page and we're going to paste that in. Of course, we have to ensure that all our script tags are using the same language. So let's set this to TypeScript and hit save. And we want to create a new function, right? And it's going to be called sign up with Google, right? It's going to be an asynchronous function. And let's allow Copilot to autocomplete the body. So it's going to say, we're going to set the loading indicator to say that it's creating your account. Nice. We're going to call the sign in with pop-up from Firebase Auth. So let's just import it from Firebase Auth right here. So sign in with pop-up, right? We don't need to update this. As a matter of fact, we don't even need this. We can just wait for this to come back with a success or error response. And once the call to sign in with a pop-up is successful, we're going to update the toast message to say, hey, the account was created successfully. And we're going to redirect the user to the dashboard. Cool. If there's an error message, of course, we're going to log it for debugging purposes. And then we're going to update the toast as well. So let's save that. And we're going to hook up this function to our button. So I'm going to say a click, paste that in, sign up with Google. So let's go back to our app, give it a quick refresh. I'm going to click on this one. And you see we have the loading indicator here and our pop-up where we can select one of our Google accounts. And once we sign in with our Google account, it redirects us to our dashboard and displays our name right here. And of course, the notification gets updated. You can go ahead and close that. And that's good. Cool. So now if we come back to our Firebase project and we check the authentication section, you can see where we have these two users created. And this user was created with the email provider, this one with Google. Nice. So now we can go back to Eraser or roadmap. and we can check off this one, right? So we successfully created the registration page in our application. Let me just go back to register for now. Let's see what this looks like on a mobile device. That's fine. That's fine. So now we want to actually create our login page. We're going to go back to VS Code. Let me see. Do we need to add any comments to this? Yes, we need to add a comment right here. This has to be created in a separate script tag. Nice. I think these are self-explanatory. Yeah. All right. So hit save. And I'm going to go ahead and just copy all of this. And remember that our index page is acting as our login page or sign-in page. I'm just going to come here and paste this all in. And this should say something like sign in. Now, we're going to actually update this text as well. It should say, welcome back. Enter your details to get started. I'm going to hit save. And this should not say create account. This should say sign in. For signing in, we don't need to enter our name, just our email and password. And this should say sign in with Google. So I'm going to change this from sign up to sign in. Honestly, this function can just be a utility function because it's the same on both sides. The only thing that's different is the message that's displayed when we're loading or waiting for the action to be complete. So here it's saying creating your account. We can just change this to we are signing you in. Save that right there. Right. So sign in will pop up. We pass the auth instance on Firebase, pass the provider, and we're redirecting the user to the dashboard just the same. Cool. Now for signing in, we should change this text as well. It should say sign in. Cool. Down here, instead of the register schema, we are going to actually pass the login schema. Let me close this register page, pass the login schema right here. Down here, of course, we don't need to be updating the profile once the user signs in. And instead of calling the create user with email and password function, what we are going to call, let me just remove this, it's not being used. Sign in with email and password. This is the one we want. So we're going to use this one instead to sign the user in. We don't actually need to wait on the user. We can just save that right there and redirect the user to our dashboard. Cool. So let's go to the sign in page to see what we have. Of course, that's our home page. So it says sign in, welcome back, enter your details to get started. We have the email, we have the password, we have the sign in button. Error messages are working, and we have the sign in with Google button right here. So of course, I can click on this. I'll still get a pop-up to sign in, select an account, and it redirects me to the dashboard. If I go back and I sign in with the John email, so let's copy this email, go to our application, paste that in, put in our password, hit sign in, we get signed in as John. Cool. So our sign-in page is working. Nice. Now we also want to add a forgot password page. Cool. Now this one will be similar to the sign in. So I'm just going to right click on this page. I'm going to click on duplicate file or directory. I'm going to say forgot. Oh, that's not how you spell it. Password / index. Right. And let's just update the text. So this should say forgot password. The subtext will say something like, let us help you sign in to your account. Cool, that's fine. For this section, we only need the email input. We need a button that says send instructions. This will be our submit button. And we need to give the user the option to go back to the sign-in page. So let me just reload VS Code to get rid of these red squiggly lines. And this should say, go to sign in. Cool. Now this is going to use the to property to redirect the user to the home page. And instead of, we don't need all of this. So let's remove this provider from here. We don't need the sign in with Google button or function. What we do need is the function that says send, wait, what's it called? Password reset, I think. Send password reset email, right? So this function will actually send an email to the user with a link for them to reset their password. Cool. So down here, we want to await send password reset email. It's going to take the authentication instance, right? The email, and then a third value, which will be an object where we can actually tell Firebase where to redirect the user to. Now, you actually probably want to store this value in an environment variable so that when you deploy it, it's not using localhost 3000. But essentially, this is just telling Firebase that when the user updates their password and choose to continue, it will redirect them to our sign-in page, which for this application, it's here. Cool. So we're going to save that. Here we want to update this message where we are sending the instructions to your email. Down here, we are going to actually update this message to say, please check your email. Nice. Of course, after sending them this message, we don't want to redirect them to the dashboard because they are not actually logged in. We want to redirect them to the sign-in page. So sign-in page. So redirect to sign-in page. Cool. Now, to get to this forgot password page, we want to add a link to our home page. And we can actually add that link between the password field and the sign-in button. I'm going to put a paragraph element right here. Put a nuxt link inside of it. It's going to go to forgot password, right? And it's going to say forgot password. Of course, you want to add some style to this. So we're going to make it semi-bold. We're going to make it our primary text. And when we hover, I want it to be underlined. Cool. So let's go to our home page. And here we have our forgot password link. This is way too big. So let's make it a bit smaller with text SM. That's more like it. So click on that and we're at the forgot password page. Now, if we click on this, go to sign in, it will take us back to the sign in page. Good. So here, I actually have to create an account where I can get this email sent to. I'm just going to go ahead and create a temporary email. So I'm going to go to temp mail. It's going to generate a temporary email for me just to test this feature out. I'm going to go ahead and copy that email, go back to my app, go to the, I don't have a link that goes to the registration page. So I actually need that. So let me go ahead and copy this. I'm going to put it below our form. And it should say something along the line of don't have an account. Of course, I want to put the class up here, make the text small. Also want it to be centered. And this should say create one here. So let me see. This shouldn't be going to forgot password. This should be going to our register page, right? Register. And then we want this to be a bit away from our form. So margin top of 10 should be fine. We'll click on that. Nice. Of course, we need to add such a link to this page as well, just in case the user lands on this page by accident and they need to go and actually log in instead of creating an account. So let's go to the register page and we're going to copy. Let's just copy this over. Let's copy this over to register, load a form, and it should say already have an account. And then it says sign in here. And this should go to our homepage. Nice. So on our register page, we have the option of going to the sign in page. We can go to the forgot password page. We can go back to sign in, and we can also create the account. I'm going to go ahead, copy this again. Let's just call this person Jan or Yab. This is the email, and I'm going to use a random password. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's create that account. Say Yab is logged in, and let's say Yab forgot their password, right? So now we actually want to go to our forgot password page. We're going to put that email in and send the instructions. And that did not work. And the reason for that is we did not update the schema. So we should be using the forgot password schema instead of the login one on our forgot password page. Cool. So if we go back and refresh this and we paste this in, then we should be able to send the instructions. And it's saying, please check your email. We're sending the instructions to your email. Okay, this should be updated as well. This text should not be saying we're sending the instructions after it was successfully sent. So let's see, where is that? So here we need to send the description, change the description as well. We have sent your instructions to reset your password. Nice. Cool. Over here, you can see where we actually got this email from Firebase, from our application. And it's telling us that, you need to follow this link to reset your pet's password. And this is the name that we gave our application in our Firebase project. And it's for this email address. So once you click on this link, right, Firebase has this as the interface where you can add a new password. Let's just use this random password. Hit save. And now if the user clicks on continue, Firebase will redirect them to the URL that you set in the code action section of this function. So this localhost 3000 right here, Firebase will redirect them to this link after they click on continue after resetting their password. Cool. So now we know all of those functionalities are working. Now we want to actually look at adding a middleware. Let's go back to our roadmap to see where we are. We created the login page. We created the forgot password page, right? We have the dashboard page. It's not complete, but we're going to go to add in a middleware. Cool. So middleware in the VueFire documentation, it actually tells you how you can do this in Nux. So here it's saying you can actually wait for the user to be ready in the route middleware, and you get the user with the get current user function. So this is actually the example that's provided. So let's just go ahead and copy this, right? And I'm going to go to my VS Code and create a new middleware. So let's right click on the middleware folder, click on new middleware, and I'm going to call this one Auth, right? And I'm just going to go ahead and paste the example in. So this is getting the user. And then now if we don't have a user, right, we want to await navigate to, and where are we navigating to? We're navigating to our sign-in page, and we want to set the redirect query in the URL to redirect the user to this page that's protected, so that we can grab it from the URL when they log in again and redirect them to that page. So let's hit save. And this middleware isn't global, so we'll actually need to manually add it to the pages that need it. And in our situation, the page that needs it is actually this dashboard page. So we're going to come here and we're going to say define page meta, right? We're going to say middleware. Now this can be a string or it can be an array of middlewares. It doesn't matter. The syntax is dependent on if you want to add more than one middleware to your page. So if it's just a single one, you can use a string. But if you have more than one, then definitely go ahead and add them in that array. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And now I'm going to create a second middleware, right? Now this second middleware is going to be called already logged in. And like the name suggests, it's going to check if the user is already logged in. Once the user is logged in, then I want to actually redirect them to our dashboard. So right here, we don't have to use the object syntax for navigate to. We can just say, let's navigate them to the admin/dashboard page. Right? And we don't have to replace the route. So if the user does exist and this middleware is registered to the page, then we want to send them straight to the dashboard. Where are we going to use this middleware? We're going to actually use it on the authentication pages. So let me just close those and minimize this. So on our login page, we definitely want this already logged in middleware. So I'm going to paste this in. I'm going to say already logged in. Let's save that. Let's copy it and move to the register page. We want it over here as well. And we want it on the forgot password page. Cool. So now if we restart our application, because when you create a new middleware, you have to actually restart the app for them to take effect. So restart the application. And if we go to our app, okay, both are trying to go to the home page. Let's see what will happen. So you can see where we were not redirected. And I think this is because we aren't logged in. Let me try to sign in with Google to see if that will make a difference. So we are now logged in. Good. If I try to go to the sign in page, you can see where it's redirecting me to the dashboard. So if I try, it won't allow me. Nice. And that's what we want. Cool. So we successfully added our middleware, right? We haven't fully tested it because we have to test if this page is actually protected. And to do that, we're going to actually add the sign-out functionality. Cool. So let me just close these and let's go to the dashboard. So here we're going to add a navbar, right? We're going to make it sticky. And inside of the navbar, we're going to add a container. We're going to give it an explicit height of 14. That's 56 pixels. We're going to make it flex, item center, justify between. And right here, we're going to add a nuxt link that goes to admin dashboard. And it should say pets. Right? Save that. Add some classes to this. So we're going to make it font, semi-bold, text LG. Nice. And to the right of this navigation bar, we want to add some buttons, right? So the first button is going to be used for changing the theme of our website. So we can toggle between light and dark mode. And then the next button will be used to log or sign the user out. So this should be flex, item center, gap of about 2 should be fine. We want UI button. We want the button to be an icon, a small icon button, right? The variant should be ghost. We also want to add a title. I'm going to say toggle theme. In here, we also want to add that toggle theme text, and we're going to add the SSR only or the SR only class to this. So it's for screen readers only. And in here, we're going to add our icon. So we're going to say icon name is going to be lucid sun medium, right? So let's hit save and see what this looks like. Okay, so this is what it looks like. The icon is a bit small. So let's make it a bit bigger. Add a class, width for height for save. Yeah, that's better. So now when you click on this, you want to toggle between light and dark. How do we do that? I'm going to actually add this inline function to take care of that functionality, or an inline click function, right? So I'm going to say add click. I'm going to say $ color mode preference is going to be equal to, and we're going to check if color mode value is dark. And if it is, we want to set the preference to light. If not, we want to switch it back to dark. So once we save this and come back, we should be able to click, and now we're able to switch between light and dark mode. Nice. So now on to the sign out functionality. So we're going to copy this button down. All right. This is not what we wanted to do when it's clicked. We want this to say log out. We also want to change this icon from sun to logout, right? And we want to call the logout function when this is clicked. Cool. So we're going to come here and create a function called logout. It's going to be equal to an asynchronous function. And we are going to import from Firebase Auth the sign out method. I'm going to say Firebase Auth. I'm going to get sign out, right? Now, in order to use the sign out function, we also need the auth instance over here. I'm going to say const auth equal to use Firebase Auth. And in here, I'm going to await sign out. I'm going to pass it the auth instance with the exclamation behind it. And I'm going to navigate the user back to the sign-in page and replace this. Cool. So let's try this out. If we click on logout, we're taken back to the sign-in page. And if we try to go back, you can see where the middleware that we had, the Auth middleware that's protecting the admin page, you can see where it actually redirected us back to the sign-in page, and it added this redirect query to the URL. Cool. So in order to access our admin page again, we have to sign in again. So let's click on sign in. Then we're redirected to the admin page, right? And if we try to go to our sign in page again, we are redirected back to our admin page. So the middlewares are working perfectly. Cool. Now back to our dashboard. So our sign out, logout functionality is in place. Now let's look at getting the data for our logged in user, right? Because I think that was on our roadmap. Let's see. Yes, so next we need to add a functionality for managing pets. We actually did this one already, so we added the logout functionality. Let's move that up. Let's add the functionality for managing pets. Now our pets will have a specific type, and I'm going to create that type now. Let's create a file called types.ts. I'm going to export type pet, right? And it's going to be equal to an object that has an ID, potentially. It's going to be a Firebase ID, so it's going to be a string, all right? Our pet will have a name for sure, whether we're creating or updating. We can give our pet an age. Should this be mandatory? Yes, let's make it mandatory. Let's also add the created at, which will be a date string, the updated at, and we want to know the user who owns this pet. Cool. So we're going to save this. And then in here, we are going to display our pets, right? But first, we need to actually query the database to get said pets. And how we'll actually do this is with the help of the Firebase documentation. So if you minimize the authentication section, go to Cloud Firestore, we can look at the read data section. So here you can see how you can get data, right? It tells you how to get multiple documents from a collection. You can use this query, and this is what we'll actually be using. So we're going to copy this, all right? We're going to go to our admin. We're going to paste that import in. And you may be wondering, where will we get this DB from? This DB will actually come from the VueFire application. So it's going to be const db is equal to use Firestore. So this composable will actually return the Firestore instance. Cool. So let's move this below this, right? And the collection is a function from Firebase Firestore. You can see it right here. According to the documentation, if we're going to create a query, we need to pass the collection reference. I think that's what it's called. So it says you can also retrieve multiple documents with one request by querying documents in a collection. For example, you can use the where to query for all the documents that meet a certain condition that use get to retrieve the results. And this is how they show that you can use it. But in the VueFire documentation, if you go to get started, they actually show you how you can use a composable that they provide. That composable is called use collection for Firestore. And then you can pass in a query, right? So you can pass in the collection or a query. And what use collection will do, it will provide the results as a single variable, or you can destructure the results along with some other helpful properties, like if the request is pending and all of that good stuff. So we're going to use this use collection to get our results from our Firebase project. Cool. So here in VS Code, we constructed a query. We're telling it to use the database instance and query the pets collection. So I'm going to add a variable up here. I'm going to call it collection name. Pets is what I want to call it. I'm going to copy this collection name, paste it down here. And I want to get the collection where I want to get items rather, where the user ID is exactly equal to this user's ID. Except that value is not present. Oh, so this is a ref. The user.value .uid. Nice. Cool. So this is the query. Now, in order to send the request, we have to use the use collection composable that's provided by VueFire. So we're going to say const open close bracket equal use collection, and then we can pass that query in. In order to get TypeScript help, we can also pass the type of the results. And in our case, it's going to be of type pet. Cool. So in here, we can actually destructure the data, right? And I'm going to rename this to pets. And we can get the error message if one is returned. We can also get this pending property. And we'll actually use this pending property to display some loading state in our UI. Cool. So with this saved, right now, our application just sent that request to Firebase. And if we should go to the View Dev Tools, let me close this and reopen it. View, go to Components. If I should go to Index, which is this page, you can see where the pets array is being returned right here, and it's empty because this user has not created any pet as yet. Cool. So what we're going to do is let's go ahead and add some padding here. So now we're going to actually create a modal that will help us to add a new pet. So I'm going to go to components, and you can see here where we don't have the modal added as yet. So we're going to run the UI script right here. And we're going to add the dialog component as well as the skeleton. So let's search for dialog, select that one, and skeleton for the loading state. We're not installing any dependencies. Our application will run some error of the sort. Let's restart this. And up here, let me just reload the instance of VS Code. So it will pick up the actual components that we just added. Up here, we can create a new component, and we're going to call it pet modal, right? So pet modal is going to be a dialog like we said earlier. So let me just reload this again. And we're going to bring in the UI dialog component. And we want to say vModel open is going to be tied to this open property that we're going to add down here. So we're going to say const open is equal to define model. And for anyone that has not read the Vue 3.4 update, this define model macro was taken out of experiment. It's officially a part of Vue, and what it replaces is for versions previous to 3.4, you had to create a prop. So it was done like this. If you wanted to add vModel to your component, you had to create this model value property, and then you had to create an emit that says update model value or something like that. Something like this. You had to do this explicitly. Now with this define model macro, you don't have to do that anymore. Vue will take care of it for you. So we're just going to set the default value in this thing, false. Cool. And for our dialog, instead of accepting a model value prop right here, we're going to accept a pet. This can be undefined or not, and it's going to be of type pet. Cool. So we can actually call this component inside the dashboard and pass a pet to it. Now we're going to use this pet value when we're editing a pet, and if it's absent, then we're going to be creating a new pet, right? So we're going to create a value called is editing, and that's just going to be a computed property that returns true if the props at pet value is truthy. If not, it's going to return false, right? So based on this is editing value, we want to create a title for our modal, right? And it's going to say if the is editing value is true, then we're going to say we're editing a pet. Otherwise, we're going to say add a pet. Cons the description as well. Edit your pet, add a new pet, and we also want to bind the button text to this is editing value. It should say if we are editing it, it should say update. If not, it should say create. Cool. Next, what do we want? We want to actually fill out this dialog. So we're gonna use the UI dialog content, right? And we're gonna pass in the title. We're going to also pass in the description. And then we're going to use the content slot to render our form. Now, as always, we're going to use a field set. We're going to give it a class of grid and a gap of 5. And then we're going to add the UI input, the first one that will correlate with the name of the pet. So we're going to add a name right here. I'm going to give it a label of pet name. And then we also want to give the user the ability to add the pet's age as well. So let's say age, let's say pet age. Let's set this type to number. Let's give it a minimum of 0 and hit save. Of course, we need a button that will be used to submit our form, right? It's going to be of type submit, and it has a class of width full. So to test this out, let us go back to our dashboard over here, and we are going to add the pets modal or the pet modal. So pet modal, we are going to say that it's vmodal to dialog property, and we're going to bind the pet that we pass into a property called edits item. Cool. So down here, we're going to say cons dialog is equal to a ref, that's false by default, and the edit item is going to be pet or undefined. Let's see. Yes, so it should be pet or undefined. Cool. So we can save this, and up here we actually want to wrap this in a div, and this div should have a class of flex. On smaller screens, it's going to be flex column. It's going to have a gap of 5, and on larger screens, it's going to be flex row. And then it's going to be justify between. Let's save that. Down here, I actually want a button that's going to say add a pet, and the dialog should be true. So hit save right there, and I'm going to see what it looks like. So this is what it looks like. It's kind of wide. I'm going to go to my Tailwind config and update the size of this to about 1100. I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to restart my Linux application. Close that, come back to my app, wait for it to load. That looks a bit better. So if I click on this button right here, I'm presented with the dialog, right? This is kind of wide as well, so let's make this a bit narrower. That's the word. The class, let's say max width is about 400 pixels. Yeah, that should be fine. So we can now add a new pet to our Firebase instance or Firestore for this specific user. Cool. But first, we need to actually add validation to this form, because now if we submit it, then it will just reload the page and add these properties to the URL. And we don't want that. So let's go to utils, validation. We're going to export cons pet schema. That's going to be an object, right? Now this object can have an ID, which will be a string. It's nullable, and the label is going to be ID. We also need a name that's required. We're going to say this is called pet name, right? And it has to be at minimum 2 characters, at max 50. We also want age. This should not be a string. This should be a number. So let's say age. Number is required. Minimum should be, it can be 0. That's fine. And if the person does not enter a number, we want to show a type error message to say that age must be a number. We also want, let's see, so we have the ID, the age, the user ID, created that and updated that properties. So let's just copy these, paste it in. So created that can be a string, nullable, updated that is the same, and the user ID is the same. Cool. So this is what our pet schema should look like. I'm just going to copy this, and then I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to use the use form composable from VeeValidate. Let's use form. I'm going to pass in the validation schema, use it to type schema utility, and pass in that pet schema that we just created. Cool. Okay, so Nux picked this up without me having to restart the server. It's good. I'm going to extract the handle submit function from here and the is submitting property. Of course, is submitting is going to be bound to the disabled property on our field set. And for our form, when it's submitted, we want to call the submit function, right? So now we're going to say cons submit, and that's going to be equal to handle submit, right? Now, if we are editing this form, we want to just update the pet record, right? And if we are creating a new pet, then we want to send that create request to Firebase. Now, if we want to see what functions to use when creating a record, we can come back to the Firebase documentation and we can come to the add and manage data section. And here we'll actually see how we can add data to our Firestore database. Cool. Now, there are many methods for adding data. We can use the setDoc method, right? And the setDoc method will just create a record in Firestore at the collection name with the given ID. Now, in my opinion, instead of you creating the IDs manually, it's actually sometimes better to allow Firebase to generate the ID, and then you can add it to the document itself. Cool. Usually, how I do this is I use the add doc method, right? So you can create a reference to the document that you want to create, and then you can use the, is it add doc? Oh, it's set doc. So it says here, in some cases, it can be useful to create a document reference with an auto-generated ID, and then you use that reference later. So this is how you do it. You import these things from Firestore, Firebase Firestore. So let's copy them and import them into our pet modal. All right. So we have collection, doc, and set doc. Let me just go ahead and copy the collection name from over here as well. Where is it? Collection name. And let's paste that in somewhere. Right. And then according to the documentation, you create a reference, right? So I'm going to create this new reference. So if we're not editing, we're going to create a record. So here, I'm going to say the pet ref is going to be equal to the collection. So we need to get this database instance as well. So we can copy it over from the admin file. It's going to be const db equal to use Firestore, right? And we're passing in the instance to the collection. And then we want to pass in the collection name. Nice. So once we have this reference, let's create reference. We can then now use the setDoc method to create this record in Firestore. So we're gonna say await setDoc. Of course, setDoc is imported from Firebase Firestore, and we're gonna pass in the petref along with the data that we're trying to save. Cool. So the data that we're saving, obviously the values from the form, which we're getting the age and the name from the fields. So we're going to spread those, right? And then for not user ID yet, for the created at, we can use the Firebase server timestamp. But what I like to do is just to use a new date and set that to ISO string. Same thing for updated at. And now for the user ID, I want to get the user. So we're going to have to get our logged in user. So const user equal to use current user, right? So it's going to be user.value.uid. So the currently logged in user will be the owner of this record. So we're going to save that. Let's remove this for now. Right. Let's see. So we're going to say const ref is equal to this reference. And then we're going to wait on the document to be created. And then we're going to show a message to say the pet was successfully created. And then we're going to close our modal. Cool. So let's see if this works. Go back to our app, open the console so we can catch any error. So let's give it a name. Let's say Sally is 2 years old. Create, and the pet was successfully created. Nice. Now if we go back to our project and we go to Firestore Database, then we can actually see where this record is inside of Firestore. Cool. So we have the age, the name, created at timestamp, updated at timestamp, and the user ID that created this record. Nice. So what we want to do is to display all of that information here. Cool. So how we do that now is we go back to our admin page. All right. And below this, we're going to create a section, give it some classes. We're going to say grid, give it gap of 5. Let's say the grid columns is 1 on mobile. On medium-sized screens, we're going to display 2 cards. And larger screens, we're going to display 3 cards. And for Excel and up, we're going to display 4 cards. Cool. Now we're going to use this template tag to loop over the pets that are being retrieved here. So we're going to say pets. We're going to say for p in pets, right? We're going to give this a key of p.id. And we're going to use our card. Did we add the card component? No, we did not. So let's just add this card quickly with the UI command or the UI script. So this should restart our application. Let me just reload. So we have our card here now. Just minimize this. And we can just use our card component to display the different pets for this user. Cool. So I'm going to say UI card. I'm just going to say once it's hovered, let's make the border primary. Right. Let's say UI card content. And the first thing I want to display is actually the pet's name. So p.name, right? Let's make this semi-bold. That. We also want to display the pet's age. So p.age. And we're gonna make this a little bit dim. Text muted foreground. Save that. See what it looks like. And we can see this is what we have. Nice. So this pet that we just created is being displayed here. Let's add some margin between this and this. We're gonna say margin top 10. Save that. Let's see what it looks like. Nice. Let's see. Next, we want to add buttons that will be used to either delete or update the current pet record. So I'm gonna say UI card footer. Oh. Nice. Let's say UI button. Let's say edit, and what should be delete. I'm gonna make the variant of this one ghost. Let's save that, see what it looks like. And these are too big. Let's just make them smaller in size. Size SM. Let's add a gap between the two buttons. Save, and this is what they actually look like now. Let's see. This looks too small. Probably need to leave this at 3. Right? Yeah, give it some more space. All right, cool. So let's add a name, or probably need to add this inside a span. Add some classes to it. Muted, margin, right? So 2. Let's save that. Nice. And do the same thing down here. Span, age, class, margin right. Let's see what that looks like. And that's fine. So now when we click on this delete button, we want to ask the user to confirm that they want to actually delete this record. Cool. And for that, I'm just going to go ahead and add that delete function. So I'm going to say const remove is going to be an asynchronous function. That's going to, this probably should take a pet record. Pets, right? And I'm going to say const confirm is equal to await confirm. Do I have to await confirm? Let's say res. Nope, I don't have to await. Nice. So confirm, pass in a message. Are you sure you want to remove this pet? And if this is yes, then we're going to delete the document. Now, how do we delete this document? We can go back to Firebase and we can go to the delete data section. This section is straightforward. It tells you that you have to pass a document reference to the delete doc function, and that's how it's done. So we can just copy this. I think this is already doing it for us. We just need to import this from Firebase, Firestore, and we also need to import the delete doc function as well. So let's see, doc, Okay, let's just paste this in. Ooh, pet.id. This should be pets.id. So this is going to be present, and the collection name should be here. Right? So this remove, we're gonna hook it up to the delete button. So add click, remove, and we're gonna pass in the pet instance. Cool. So let's go ahead and test this out. Open the console just in case we have any errors. Click on delete. It's asking if you want to remove this pet. We're gonna say yes, and the pet is gone. And if you come here in the collection, you can see where it was actually removed. So that's working as it should. Nice. We're gonna go ahead and add another pet. Let's add Sally back. 2 saved. Nice. We probably need to add something like this to the end of this function that says use success pet removed successfully. All right, good. Now we need to add the edit functionality. So we're gonna click handler for this button. We're gonna say set edit, and we're gonna pass in the pet. So this set edit function is going to be a function that takes in the pet. The edit item is going to be set to this pet, right? And then the dialog is going to be set to true. And I'm going to save this, and this won't work just yet. I'll tell you why soon. So if I click on edit, you can see where nothing's happening right here. And that's because we need to actually set the value inside of the pet modal. So when we pass in this pet value into this component, we can actually extract the set values function from the use form composable provided by VeeValidate. And what we're going to do is we're going to watch the open state. Where is it? Open, right? We're going to watch this open state. So let's say we're watching open, and we want the value, and we're going to call this function. So if this is true, then we're going to check if is editing is true as well. And once this is true, we're going to set the values for pet. Cool. I'm not going to put an exclamation here. I'm going to say question mark or an empty object. Cool. Now, when this modal closes, we actually want to reset the form. So we're going to extract the reset form function from use form as well. And we're going to say else reset form. Cool. We also want to ensure that we pass the pet as the initial value to our use form composable. So we're going to say props pet or an empty object. Cool. So now if you should click on this edit button, you can see where the values are displayed here. Now the title is updated to edit pet, the button text is updated to edit pet, and that's because the is editing value is set to true. Cool. Now, when we're updating a value, according to the Firebase documentation, let's go to add data again. In the update document section, now it says to update some fields of a document without overriding the entire document, you could use the update methods. So we can use update doc, and this will actually update the document. So again, we're going to need a reference to the document. So we're going to copy this. And here we're going to say petref is going to be equal to doc. We have the database instance, and we are going to pass the collection name. And we have to pass the ID for this specific pet. So we're going to say that the props.pet.id is what we want, right? And we're going to put an exclamation mark here because we're sure that this value is actually defined. So now that we have the pet reference, we're going to call the update doc. And then we're going to update only the values that we need to change, right? We're going to say updates doc, and this is being imported from Firebase Firestore. And we're going to pass in the pet reference. Now that we have the update doc function, we pass the pet ref to it, and then we're going to pass in the values that we want to update. So the name is going to be values.name, the age is values.age. Of course, we want to change the updated at timestamp. And then once that's done, we want to say that the pet was updated successfully. So let's save that. Let's go back to our code. Let me just refresh the page for good measure. And we're going to edit Sally. And that didn't work. Why did this not work? All right, so let's go back to the code and see what we're doing wrong. All right, so after restarting the application, everything seemed to work. If we come and click on the edit button now, it's actually populating the values. And let's say we update this to Sam. It's 3, 4. If we update, we can see where it was updated successfully, and this value was updated real time. If we should add a new record, we have an issue now where the edit item is actually still being passed in. So in order to fix this, after updating a record, what we need to do is we need to go to the admin page, and we also need to watch this dialog value right here. Cool. So we're going to say, let's watch dialog, right? And if it's not true, then we're going to set the edit item.value to undefined. So if we should open this, this should be a clean form. If we edit this, we should have values. If we close it and click on add again, we should get a clean form again. Cool. So now we can add more pet records. Let's say Rex. Let's save that, and you can see where it's being updated real time. If I should, let's see, can I open this side to side? Yes. If I should update, oh, wrong tab. This one. So if I should update one of these records, let's say I'm going to change this from 2 to 5. If you look right here, you will actually see where it updates real time. Cool. So let me go ahead and update, and you can see where it was updated real time. All right, so now just to see if our records are being created for this user only, we're going to log out, right? And then we're going to sign in back with the John user, was it? The John user, right? So we're going to sign in back with this user and see if they'll have a totally different set of records. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Sign in. Nice. And there are no pets in the database for John Doe. So we can go ahead and add one. So one called Rick. Save. And this pet will belong to this login user. Cool. So the data is somewhat separate, but not quite. In Firebase, your Firestore database comes with what they call rules, right? And rules essentially just tell Firebase who should have access to what in your Firestore database. Now, if you want to learn about rules, there's actually documentation down here about security rules. You know, they give an introduction, they tell you how to get started, how to write your different security rules. They have a few articles on understanding the security rules. But the rules that I'm going to add right now are for the pets collection specifically. So I'm going to protect this collection from, you know, anyone that's not authorized and that don't own the records inside of this collection. Now, once you define a rule in your Firestore database, for anything that's not under that rule, the user won't be able to access it. So if we created another collection, let's say food, right? And we created some documents under that food collection, but we only added rules to manage the pets collection, then no one will be able to access the foods collection, or at least I think that's how it works. So let's go back to our rules section and let's add a rule. So the first rule we want to add, like I said, it's going to be specific to the pets collection, right? And I'm gonna say doc ID, you'll see ID, and then I'm gonna say the docs, right? So this is the part to the stuff in the pet collection. Now, instead of having it where anyone can read and write to the database until this time, I'm going to change that to say you can only read and write for the specific records that you own. I may have to do these as separate rules. So I'm going to say allow read if the request that's coming in is authenticated, so it's not equal to null, and the information that they're trying to access. So let's say the documents that they're trying to access. So resource.data.user ID. So each collection, each pet that we created, we actually added this user ID property to it. So we only want you to be able to read the resources that you own. So I'm going to say the resource.data.user ID should be equal to the request UID. Cool. So I'm going to save this and see if it works. It might not, I'm not sure. But let's go back and let's just refresh this page and see if we can read anything. And we can. So that rule actually worked. So we can read the records that belong to us. Cool. Now, to test out this rule locally, what I could do is on the admin page, instead of passing this where clause, I can try removing it, hit save, and if I should reload, I will get this error message, missing or insufficient permissions, because I'm trying to read all of the records from the pets collection here. but I don't own all of them. And according to this rule, I can only read anything from this path if I'm authenticated and I have access to the resource. So let's just put that back, hit save, go back to our application, reload, and voila, here's our record. Cool. Next is we want to allow write. So write is basically updating and deleting and creating. If it's going to be similar to this one, if we are authenticated, so requested auth is now null. And let's see, right, we don't need to check if the result.data.user ID is equal to auth.uid for create. Anyone should be able to create, but for updating and deleting, so I'm going to put update here and delete here, we have to ensure that the user is logged in and that they own the record that they're trying to update or delete. So we can publish this, test it out. So let's see if we can still read, right? Let's see if we can still create. Yes, we can. And let's see if we can still delete. Yes, we can. Awesome. So I think that covers most of what we wanted to accomplish in this video. It's kind of long, but hopefully you guys learned something from it. You can definitely check out this eraser app. It's great for helping you to explain stuff. Give it a try if you get the chance to. I was thinking about doing the login email, but I may do that another time. I was planning on using the view email Nuxt package. So this module, we can actually use it to create emails with view syntax, right? And send them to our users in our application. But definitely look at this another time. Let me just go ahead and remove it from the list for now. And I'm going to copy and paste this in my README. So let's just highlight everything, paste it in the README. Yep, and let's see what it looks like. This is the preview. Nice. All right, guys. So if you have any questions, just let me know and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Have a great day and happy coding.